Yeah, let me find my window. No mic, no worries. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Let me go to the community meeting agenda. Yeah. Hey everyone. So welcome to the Harbor community meeting. Today's March 24th. Yes, today mostly we just have two items. The first thing is declarative config. You might have heard of this. There's a Harbor issue here that's very popular, talking about some of the issues around configurations in Harbor today. And we talked about how we are planning to make this a little better in the upcoming 2.3. The other thing is we're working on an integration with Nidus, and Wang Yan will give a demo. Yeah, so does everyone want to take a minute to read through this, or I can just do a quick summary?
I would say do a quick summary.
Okay. Yeah, so essentially, we made a pretty big change to 1.8 before Harbor version 1.8, before Harbor version 1.8. I could configure Harbor to use external auth and some other things via a config file or environmental variables, and then we took that away. And then so with that, you lose some flexibility, and I guess people really didn't like that. If you look at the number of thumbs up on this issue, had some pretty good discussion throughout the issue. And if you read the thread, I think some other customers or users are not wanting to use the UI at all, right? And they want to apply configs that live in their console management in CI/CD. And so one of the biggest problems that with the current design, I think, is that configurations that you make via API can still be overwritten by the front end, right? The web console. And so there's a bit of a config drift in that sense. And for larger companies, enterprises, they have compliance or auditing requirements to be able to track all the configurations made, right? So if the configs live in CI/CD, then you can see exactly who made the push, what changes they made, and get the entire history of all the changes made in that Harbor instance, in the history of that Harbor instance, right? So yeah, I mean that would be very possible with the audit configs, with config files, but with APIs, it's difficult to validate the settings that you're making through API. Like it would be difficult to do a lot of introspection of the API itself. There's solutions in Ansible, there's other solutions, but like for this issue, right? And I talked about this towards the end, which is our thinking is that we're attempting to find out the exact set of configurations that should be managed by CI, and then we're drawing that line so you're not modifying it in both config and in API, right? So maybe we have some sort of like base configurations, right? Things that are meant to be managed once, or not as frequently by the Harbor system admin. Maybe it's just based on persona, right? Like the Harbor system admin, which deals mostly in auth control, in setting the backing store. All of these things should be managed by a config, and then the more user facing controls for the other Harbor personas, like the developer or the guest, things like that, could be managed by by GUI, by API. That's sort of the basic idea behind what we're trying to do here with this ticket. Anything else you want to add, Daniel or Stone? I know Stone is working on the actual implementation.
Yeah. Can I share my screen
Yes, you may.
to
Let me stop
introduce
share.
my proposal?
Here you go.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I have changed my desktop. I have to change the settings of the computer. Sorry, I need to rejoin the meeting because I have changed the system setting of the Mac.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. But yeah, maybe like read through a thread and see what they're asking. Like the last comment, right? They're asking for, I think, more than what we're comfortable with delivering the first release, which is the ability to add replications and repository using config file.
Hey, Alex.
Yeah.
Sorry, Vadim, you had a question?
I think also the Kubernetes Infra guys were also looking after or looking to find a solution for themselves regarding configuring Harbor from their CI as well. So they had also a few requirements there. And I think Alex, you mean that they have this also wanted to create projects and things like that from configuration as well.
Yeah, I saw that ticket. I think what they're asking for is deploying multiple instances like across different cloud providers all over the world, right, to serve the Kubernetes project. There's a ticket called cross cluster harbor for the Kubernetes project. So yeah, I mean, I guess they're going to be doing a bunch of things, and they're not going to be wanting to configure all of this by hand on the web console. And they're going to be using the same configs across all the different instances. What they want to do is bootstrap the installation of multiple harbors on different cloud providers, and then using a single config file to propagate all the same settings, right? Like all I imagine the project's name are set up in a way that works with their CI/CD. So yeah, that's they'll be part of the users I was talking about in terms of not wanting to use the UI in any way possibly.
But I have to interrupt because that's a different requirement. Project is not configuration. Project is user data.
Yeah,
so,
project is not part of what we're trying to do here, right?
Yeah,
but
just want to clarify that this proposal will not cover that issue, and I don't think they ask the right question. There are different ways to do that. They can, set up Harbor once it's running and call some API to populate the data, and that's a totally replicable solution. But yeah, we can discuss that in some other when we have a chance. But I don't think that's the same requirement like this one.
Yeah.
They brought it up on one of the Kubernetes K8s or the K8s Infra working group meeting. There was some pushback on using Harbor because of the non-declarative nature of Harbor. In reference to this ticket in particular. but yeah, they were wanting more than what we're trying to cover here. But we'll do it in iterations. The first step is, I think, Daniel, do you have the list of the actual things that will lock down? There's a list somewhere. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't. Sorry.
I'm back.
Hey, Stone. Okay, yeah.
Hi.
Go ahead and share your screen.
Okay. Can you
Oh,
see
you are
my
sharing.
screen?
Yep.
Okay. Let me introduce the background of the issue. In the early release of the Hubble, maybe in 1.5 or 1.6, the Hubble configuration can be initialized by an environment variable like Hubble.cfg to initialize the Hubble configuration. But with the growth of the Hubble and more configuration items added to the Hubble, and this CFG file seems uneasy to maintain. And then we decided to separate the system configure and the user configure. For system configure, it can be maintained in Hubble.yaml, and for the user configure, it only can be maintained in the web console of the Hubble. But as we discussed in the issue, some CI/CD background and DevOps, and most of the user prefer to use the script or command environment file. It is very inconvenient to change the configuration by UI or REST API. Here we propose a feature to initialize the Hubble configuration by environment variable. And there are two options. One option is to provide an environment variable init configure JSON. Once it is provided, then it will initialize the configuration with the content of the this environment variable. Or another way we can, and the option 2 is that we can provide multiple environment variable in the core container. So for example, we can provide auth mode, AWS and AWS search DN in the env file of the core container. Once it is once the user setting is set by the environment variable, then the configuration is changed to read-only mode, and only can be changed by the environment variable and restart the Hubble, restart the core container. This is the configure panel. When the configuration item is in read-only mode, then the configure panel becomes read-only. This is the read-only configuration panel. In order to implement the this feature, we have to change the configure manager's code. In the configuration manager, we have to when there is a init configure JSON environment variable, here we will detect the environment variable, and if it is set, and then it will set all the configuration items here, and the read-only flag will become true. And this is the option 1. And for option 2, the user setting will be set by environment variable, multiple environment variable. It is defined in a metadata list. Here, for example, if we needed to define AWS, we should using the environment key to define AWS And if we need to define add up a filter, we should set up an environment add up a filter to set up this environment user settings. Once the environment, once this feature is enabled and triggered by this environment by is set, then all the settings in the read-only flag will become true, and all the configuration in the UI is read-only, and the API to the configuration API will return 403 for put method. The impact of this feature, if this configuration is initialized by the environment, then all configuration item in the UI or REST API is read-only, cannot be updated. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks. So yeah, I think that makes sense.
I do have some concerns. Don't could you scroll up a little bit?
Okay.
You're saying that we are providing two options. Why that? Why? I mean,
maybe
init configuration is enough.
Yeah, I think the init configuration maybe they are too large. The content is too large string, and I think this is the second one. Maybe easier to maintain. I think both of them can work.
I think it's the same because in the second option, user need to provide all the environment variables. It's the same as the configuration. I mean,
no,
if you need one key in this configuration, you will need one environment variable set, right? So it's the same.
But for other settings, if they didn't want to set, they just keep it blank.
Yeah, I can keep it blank in JSON also.
Yeah. I think both of them can work.
I would strongly prefer providing just one way.
You mean?
Yeah.
I think he's saying either or, right? He's not saying you can do both.
Either or, yeah.
He's not saying you can configure both ways.
So you're saying we can choose one of them, right?
No, he's saying we will choose one, right? Like us as the designer of this feature. We're still
yeah, we can choose one of them. If
for the user,
yeah.
For the user, there should be only one way to do it to avoid less confusing.
Yeah, so I will vote for init configuration. It's easier to, determine whether this is set because the configuration values are always growing and the environment variable names are changing. It's hard to maintain.
Yeah, I think for this for the first option, it will have require the user to maintain the JSON.
It's the same because the second way, user also need to set the environment variables. I don't think there's any difference.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, can you clarify if, let's say we choose this init configuration approach, will this value be persisted in the database or not?
No, this when the configuration, the init configuration is provided, this configuration is only read from environment, will not persist to the database.
Is that correct?
And once yeah, I think it is correct because once you have updated the configuration, I think it is better to to store in a single store, right? Current
Right.
store is the
But
environment.
but what if, I mean, if in version 1 user use init configuration and in version 2 he didn't set it, what will happen?
I think it will fail.
I think it would be
Right.
better if we persist the init configuration in the database before Harbor starts serving.
I think it is not a good idea because when you set it store in a database, then you have to set it in an environment. Then you have to select one of the value.
No, we always use the
Which
database
one?
as a
And
single source of truth. And the init configuration is just a way to populate it before Harbor starts.
I think if you store in a database and
I personally find
also-
this a little problematic because in version 1, user use auth mode LDAP.
yeah,
And,
I think yeah.
yeah.
I think
What do you mean by version
the-
1 or version 2?
I mean, different start. If I restart Harbor without setting this
Yeah.
environment, then all the data is gone. But if I, there may be the case that user set this environment variable and later he decide I would, enable the configuration API and it's okay for me to let admin to edit my setting.
And he just removes the file.
Yeah, you remove the file, and as long as the data is populated in the database, this use case is valid and possible, right?
I think
they won't. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think from the past, most problems arise if you have kind of a data synchronized and duplicated. So, for example, like if the user, so normally the case, if you deploy application, you set the environment variables and you do redeploy and you change the variable and it change the applications. But if it's in the database, it's copied into the database, and then it's not clear which value is actually the source of truth. Is it the database or is it the value? So if you change the value, and yeah, so normally, yeah, it's always it has a lot of problems. So for example, if you want to change the init config file, the config JSON, and you change the password, so you need to have a logic that overrides the database setting.
Yeah,
and if you remove things, then you need to keep things. You need to keep basically just keep the database busy, and synchronize it. So, and if you can avoid it, then I think it should be favored because it's less complex. Keeping just the database in sync without any added value, just for this use case where the user wants to switch off the init JSON config and give access to the user to manage on the UI. I mean, the user has to enter the data again, but it's nothing that's kind of makes it impossible for him to work. It will not break the application. If the user goes in and copies the JSON values in the UI, doing copy and paste, so he can manually, from now on, manually change the configuration. So it's not a big effort to do it manually once. So from the use case perspective, so what happens if the user decides, okay, we don't want to have this init config, we let the administrator change the config on the UI? Well, he goes then and adds the value there, and it's working.
Yeah, just remove the environment variable.
Yeah, exactly. Remove the environment variable and copy and paste the values that were in the environment variable in the UI. So it will not block the user to find a way of solving the problem. Whereas if we synchronize with the database, I think this can, on the long run. So if you analyze the data, it's like, what is in the database and why is the database different than on the JSON file?
But I think, why don't we just always override the database in the case you mentioned? Yeah, because we assume this init config is have higher priority than the database. Would that be easier?
I think, yeah, I mean, this would definitely work, but the question is,
I mean,
will it?
Yeah, I mean, for example, if I provide the init config and I remove it and I restart, then all the configuration is lost. That will leave the user very confused because he doesn't know what configuration need to be made to make sure things work. It's very possible that the database have other user data that may not work with the new configuration. But yeah, but we may need to think about this. I don't have a quick answer. But yeah, probably if you think it through, Stone, you know, keeping things in the environment variable will, you know, we can ensure this consistency, then it's probably fine. But I was thinking.
Yeah, but so for example, the point that you mentioned, you just remove the environment variable, and then in this case, you expect the data to persist there. You know, it's kind of a contradicting to override always the database from the init config JSON file. So you know, like if it's empty, then it will overwrite with empty values. This should be the correct behavior. But this is not what you actually expected. You expect that if it's not there, it should not reset it basically. So I think that's, I mean, the thing that's like, there's a valid point in that, definitely. And it makes sense for the user not to break and not to have surprises. But on the other hand, it will open up a lot of edge cases that needs to be handled along the way and find solutions for that. You know, this I think from a maintenance point of view, it's a lot of effort for little value.
Yeah, that would
so
make
maybe
sense.
we can we can maybe find another way how we can
but I think
satisfy the requirement.
Yeah, but I think we need to ensure one thing, that if user use this init config to initialize Harbor and use it for a while, then this Harbor instance will always need init config JSON. If this environment is gone, if it's gone, Harbor should fail right away.
Yeah.
To explicitly let user know I'm not working because I need the init config, because I was initialized with this init config. We need to do this if we do not possess the value.
Yeah,
right?
maybe it should not be called
Okay.
init config, but config override.
Yeah, whatever. But I mean, if we, I mean, you got what I mean, right? I mean, if a user choose to configure Harbor using this way as proposed, then we need to make sure after restarting or upgrade, you know, this init config or config override always exists. Otherwise, we need to fail very early.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we have to add a configuration item to indicate that it is init by configure JSON, right?
Yeah, because I mean, there's also other configs, you know, config settings that will break if you change them, you know. So it's I think if it's in the config, so it will be consistent, like, you know, config override is not init, it's like.
Yeah, and we also need to decide if what's the scenario for the user upgrade from older version where the configuration has been persisted in the database. Will we ignore this init config file, or it's a matter of decision? I think it will be safer that we ignore this, or we provide some workflow. You
mean ignore config JSON or ignore the database setting?
I think it would be safer if we ignore this config JSON, because there are already data in the database. Otherwise, normally it may be possible that the init config JSON has some value that conflict with what's persisted in the database and cause some, you know, unwanted scenario.
I think we should only trust the environment variable if it is provided, and if there are database, the value are stored in the database, it will cause some problem if we have to, for example, the DevOps change the environment variable, but he did not find that this configuration item is not changed in the UI. Right.
Yeah. So because the normal workflow is if you upgrade and you didn't have the config.json file set before, and you now explicitly set, so the user knows about the variable and he sets it because he wants to configure it from the config file. And I think it's because if you don't do nothing, it just upgrades, so it will be kind of the sunny path. If you don't change anything, you do the upgrade and it will work. But if you say after the upgrade you want to do the config file now, you set the config file, and then it's kind of an explicit decision to say, okay, I want to have it the config file so that the environment variable has the last word in there. Because this is a kind of explicit decision, you need to set this variable as an administrator. It's not something that is, there's no default.
And there, I think we need to document that in this proposal for this to cover those corner cases. And there's also there's another case that Stone, you recall that we do not allow user to update the auth mode once there are users in the user table, right?
Yeah.
But how do we prevent that in this way?
How did you prevent it, and how are you preventing it right now?
Because I can prevent it by not writing it to database. But now I'm using environment variable as single source of truth. I cannot prevent user from, shut down Harbor, editing the environment variable and restart.
Yeah, but I mean, as part of that, why are you not allowing him to change his auth mode?
Because when there is an ADAP user in a user table, and you just change the init configure.json to change it to DB, it is not allowed, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think we can fail when there is
No, I mean, sorry to interrupt. I mean, you're restarting the Harbor instance, right? You're like redeploying it basically. So if he wants to go from basic auth to LDAP, we're not going to allow that.
No.
It's currently not possible as well. So if you once you have users in the database, you cannot change the auth mode.
Yeah, I know it's not possible right now, but with this, I fail to see why that's special.
For example, I can register Alex in the database. Then I switch to LDAP and there's an Alex in the LDAP. Do I allow this Alex to log into Harbor? If I allow, there will be two Alex in Harbor at the same time.
If you switch to LDAP, then it shouldn't be, it shouldn't even know about the database. Why are the users in basic auth even being considered? I don't understand.
I mean,
yeah,
you're hooking up to LDAP.
But then there will be two Alex in one user table, and it is not possible here because we do not have the concept of domain currently in Harbor.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is like maybe we need it.
Yeah,
that will be a big. I won't be that's a big effort, but we used to discuss that quite a few years ago, and we decided not to do it.
I think it's like how Harbor is currently set up. It's this way because it's an implementation decision to do it this way.
I mean, I think about LDAP as the same way as I think about auth. Sorry, the same I think about backing store, like storage. Right, I'm cutting over to
that
a
will
different
be
system.
That will be another story if you want to bring the concept of domain into Harbor. But I don't think that's covered in this proposal.
Yeah, I know it's not covering this, but yeah. Okay. All right. I think we had a good. Yeah, I think to Daniel's point, we should document all the cases, like what happens when you make the switch midway. What happens when you want to change some of this stuff? Yeah, it'd be good to document all these scenarios. So I
Okay.
want to move over. I want to talk about Nidus now and give Wang Yan some time to talk about what Nidus is, the demo that he created, and yeah, like what we're planning to do with Nidus. So
Okay.
Nidus, Wang Yan, do you want to take it from here? Thank you.
I'm Ian. I will give you a brief introduction about Nidus and the integration of Harbor and Nidus. So what is Nidus? The Nidus project implements a user space file system on top of container image format and do some improvements like the launching speed, image space, and the network bandwidth. So the benchmarking result shows that the performance improvements compared with the OCI image, like as the image size increases, the container startup time of Nidus image remain very short. So if you want to know some details about Nidus, just go to the GitHub repo. There are also open source projects. You can get more details of documentation about that. In order to leverage the benefits of Nidus, the first thing that we need to do is convert the OCI format container image into a Nidus format container image. And Nidus provides a tool that names Nidify to do that. So today's demo is just about integrate Nidify into Harbor. And the basic idea is to leverage the Harbor job service capacity. The general workflow is when a user push an image into Harbor, once it is done, Harbor core will send a notification to the job service, and then the job service will trigger a convert job in the backend to convert the incoming image and push back to Harbor core to finish the workflow. I have to say that it's not an official integration scenario, just but a showcase to demonstrate that Harbor can have the capacity to integrate with Nidus. So let's start the demo. So after logging with the project or system admin, there's a new items called automatic convert. It's quite similar with the auto scan. So when it's selected, Harbor will automatic to convert the incoming Docker image. Let me push image first. Yeah, so here we have hardware latest, but I haven't enabled the auto convert. So let me enable it. Let me push the image again. So yep, as you can see, there is a new image created by the Nidus with the suffix Nidus in its tag. This artifact is created by the Nidify and pushed back to Harbor core. So you can see there are two artifacts in the same repo. You can still manage this artifact as others in Harbor, but this is a Nidus format Docker image, Nidus format image. And another thing here is that for the existing image already pushed into Harbor, we can provide a new API that's called the Nodus file to convert the existing OSF format image. So
I like the creative naming, but we might need to change this at some
Okay.
point. But I like it.
Okay, so after you click that backend job is a backend asynchronous job in the harbor view automatic to convert the image and back to harbor. So with another surface in its type. And that's all the demo of today.
So thank you, Long. This is my first time seeing it as well. So what is the practical application of this? I mean, when you push an image, it created a Nidus mirror. What is the goal here with that Nidus image on Harbor now?
So you just can see the harbor can manage the Nidus image. You can push, you can convert your OSX format image into the Nidus format image and then manage them in the harbor.
Okay.
But we
so-
have some, okay, go ahead.
What are the practical uses of Nidus? So where can you run the Nidus image?
Oh, you have to use the Nidus tool to run this image, but you cannot use the Docker command. It's not compatible. It's just like if I put the converted the Nidus image, it will reach an error. But it's not.
I think we have a container D plugin.
Yeah, I
They do,
didn't
yep.
set up the Nidus environment on my machine. Like what you have to set up a Nidus tool and the container D plugin to launch the Nidus format image.
So
They
I
put
think
all
you're,
the-
so it's faster startup time, right? Is there any other benefits to converting image to Nidus format?
So
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I'm asking a lot of dumb questions. This is my first time
according
really
to
looking at it.
Nidus developer, it's possible to save space because they do dedupe at the storage side.
yeah, they mentioned that there
But
are
it's
several.
certainly not true in your demo.
Yeah, it got
Yeah,
bigger,
yeah.
right?
But the demo is targeted about the integration about hardware and the Nidus, not about the Nidus itself.
Right. I understand. Yeah, I guess I was just wanting some background on like what can we do with this? Like what is our goal in integrating against it besides, hey, we can support Nidus images and you can store those on Harbor and you can pull those off Harbor. There's a lot of value in that, but I was just wanting to understand a little more about Nidus itself because you spent quite some time on it.
Yeah, we just set up a regular meeting with another team, and we will continue to discuss with them about the further integration plan. But today it's just a short idea about how does hardware integrate with that.
So
Okay.
I'm looking through an older issue here from a few months ago. Yeah, January, over in the repository there, talking about how to use Nidus with Harbor as the registry backend. It seems like that was already working. So this is, but this is the transformation integration here. Then, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a convert, and you can manage all the Nidus format image like a normal OCI image format. So you can tag, delete, or retag, or garbage collection, replication, anything.
So we could essentially say that yes, Nidus works with Harbor as well, just like we do with Singularity and
Yes,
other
yeah.
formats.
Yes, yes.
And it's non-OCI. It's a special. It's like a special format that can now be hosted.
Yeah, it's OCI compatible.
It is
Yeah.
OCI artifact.
It's OCI compatible.
I
The
thought
reason
that
it-
their whole thing was that they made improvements over OCI. That no.
In terms of storage, it's an OCI artifact. I mean, the way it's stored in the Harbor is the way we store an
Okay,
OCI
okay, got it,
artifact.
got it.
Yeah,
It's
and
through
the
our
way-
support for OCI, right? That we were
Correct.
able to make this happen.
Correct.
Okay. Got it. Thank you, Wang. I think that is helpful. I've heard a lot about Nidus recently in some of the conferences, and so we should continue to explore that integration. But it's good that at least we can host and curate these things on Harbor. So it's good, great first step.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think those are the only agenda items. Yes, Jonas, go ahead.
Yeah, just one question from the chat here. Hemant asks, when will 2.2.1 GA be released?
2.2.1. I believe we do monthly patches. So end of this month. Jiaoling, do you have an update here?
Yeah, actually we have RC out last week, and currently we are working on, I mean, we observed a few new issues here, so we are currently evaluating whether we need to include them into 2.2.1. So I think it will be very soon.
Okay. What are
Yeah.
some of the things in 2.2.1?
I'm sorry?
What are some of the things we're delivering in 2.2.1 over 2.2? Is it just bug fixes, or is there any?
Yeah, but because there is a hard issue, right? About the high CPU
Okay.
consumed, right? So we target to include it to fix it. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Cool. Any other questions or thoughts? Things you want to share? Any announcements, Jonas?
No, not right now. We will have a little announcement mid-April.
Okay. Very secretive. All right. Well, that's it. That's it, folks. Thanks for attending, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good one.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
folks.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.